Hi there, Mark here for TalkingBass.net. Welcome to the beginner's course for bass guitar. In this first series, I'm going to be giving you a basic introduction to the bass and how to get started with playing. In this bumper first lesson, I'll be taking you step by step through the absolute basics of playing, from holding the bass to tuning and playing a simple riff. So let's not waste any time and get straight into it. First of all, let's have a look at the bass and the names of some of the parts. I'm not going to go too far into details with this because I know that you're going to be more interested in trying to play the thing than remember some labels. So let's just look at the essentials first. So let's start with the three main sections of the bass. Just like a person, we've got the body, the neck and the head. Okay, so this lower part here, this big chunk of wood here, the main chunk of wood, is the body. Then we've got this long piece of wood here, that's the neck. And then we've got this head at the top, it's actually called the headstock. So we've got the body, the neck, and the headstock. Now, before we do anything else, you're going to need to know how to hold the bass. So it's worth mentioning at this point that I'm right-handed. So for any of you left-handers out there, if I refer to the right hand or left hand, just use the opposite. So if I say right hand, then, just use the left hand. So if you're going to be sitting down, you just want to place the body of the bass on either leg. There's usually a contour in the bass body down here where it curves inward, and that's to make it much more comfortable and give you a nice snug fit on your leg there. So this hand, my left hand, is holding the neck there to keep the bass in place, and the right arm is coming over the top of the body, and I'm just resting it there at the moment. But when it comes to playing, I'll be bringing the fingers down to the strings to pluck, or I might use a plectrum or whatever. So don't worry too much about position at the moment, just try to get comfortable holding the instrument. And like I say, you can use either leg. I've got it on the right leg there, but I do often practice with it on the left leg. So it's completely up to you. This is more of a classical guitar kind of stance, but some people hold it like this. Completely up to you, doesn't really matter, whatever works for you. Now, if you want to stand with the bass like this, you're going to need a strap. So if you've already got a strap attached to the bass, then that's fine, but I'll go over the basics of it anyway, for anybody that's wanting to know how to attach them properly. So if I take it off here and here, you'll notice on a strap that we've got holes at both ends. Okay, so you've got these little holes. Now these are what go around these pegs on the bass, and you'll find these pegs, one at either end of the bass. You'll get one up here on this part, and then you've got one down here at the bottom of the bass. Now these holes just go around there and you just attach it that way, but you'll need to know about the this padding up here. So you'll find that one end of the strap is thicker than the other. So we've got this thicker end here, then we've got this thin end down here, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, but you'll always find one side wider than the other. Now that big thick end wants to come up here at the neck end of the bass, and I'll show you why in a sec. So we take those holes and we place them around the peg, and if it's a new strap, you'll often have to wiggle it around to get it in because they can be quite tight at first. So then we take the other end there, place that around the peg, and then we just place it over the top of the head, and there it sits on my left shoulder there. Now you can see that that padded part, the big wider part, that is the part that goes over the shoulder, and that's why this wants to be up at this end of the bass. Okay, so there we have it. It's attached at both sides. Easy peasy. Now you're also going to want to know how long or short to set the strap. And the very simple, basic, one-size-fits-all answer to that is set the strap so that the bass is in the same position whether you stood or sat. So you can see for me that the bass is in this fairly central position, and when I stand up, it's like this. If I was to sit down, it'd be the same. This just means that when you practice sat down, like a lot of people do, you're not going to have problems when you try playing that same stuff stood up. When you move the position of the bass, your hands are going to move into different positions, and it can be almost like playing a completely different instrument. And you might, be learning something that's quite tricky for you while you sat down, you stand up, and you can't play it anymore. I know that some people like to play it, down around their ankles, and some people like to play it really high up here. But sometimes, if you bend your wrists, you can get problems in the tendons. The hands, you can start to get pains in the hands. So just be wary of that. As a general rule of thumb, try to keep the wrists as straight as possible, so that you're not getting any of this kind of thing, or at least excessive pushing in those areas. I'm like everybody, I tend to have the hand over here and it is bent a little quite often, but I always try and strive to keep it as straight as I can. You know, sometimes bad habits come in. So, like I say, just keep that, keep the strap so that it's the same whether you stood or sat down. Before we make a sound out of an electric bass, we're going to need to plug into an amplifier so we can hear the notes. You can still play unplugged with just the acoustic sound of the instrument, but it is important to know how to set up the bass and get used to that amplified sound. So to do that, you're going to need an amplifier of some sort and a lead, guitar lead, jack lead. So here's an amp and here's a lead. So you should have a socket for the lead on your bass somewhere, usually around this area. So you want to plug one end in there and then you plug the other end into the amp input, which like that. And I'd advise that you plug into the bass first before you plug into the amp, because otherwise the amp's going to amplify the sound of you putting the lead into the bass, and that sounds awful, lots of bangs and stuff. So try to always plug into the bass first before plugging into the amp. On your bass, you're going to see a number of different knobs, and different basses have different numbers of knobs, and that can all vary, you know, depending on the make and the type of bass. But all basses are going to have some form of volume control and some form of tone control. So for now, just make sure that the volume control is turned up full all the way around clockwise, and do the same with the tone. So on here, I've got a volume control and a tone control. I just turn them both fully clockwise, and then you should get something out of the amp, okay? Don't worry about all the other knobs for now, you know, the mid and the highs and the bass, you know, if you've got active controls and stuff like that. I'll go over all that later. So for now, just make sure that you turned clockwise on the volume control, and make sure you've turned up the amp a little bit so you can hear yourself. As you're probably aware from seeing other people play, to make a sound on the bass, we need to pluck the strings. Now, these are obviously the strings. And the strings run along the bass from down here at this thing called the bridge, okay? And it moves up to these metal contraptions on the headstock called the tuning pegs, both of which I'm going to cover in a few minutes. Between these two things, from here to here, it travels along the neck over this fretboard, okay? Now the fretboard is just a piece of wood on the neck, and on that piece of wood, the fretboard, you have loads of these little metal strips. And these are frets, hence the name fretboard. And they're used to divide the neck up into loads of different notes, like so. We generally pluck the strings with this hand, my right hand, and hold down the strings against the fretboard with the fingers of this hand, my left hand. Now, if you're left-handed and you have a left-handed bass, then you're obviously going to use the opposite hands. So you'll use the left hand for plucking, and you'll use the right hand for holding down the strings. So you just have to bear that in mind. So altogether, we've got the strings. These 4 strings on here. Some people have 5 strings. Some people have 6 strings. They go from the bridge down here up to the tuning pegs on the headstock, and they go along the neck here, and all these little things down here, those little metal strips there, the frets. The notes on the fretboard rise in pitch as we move up the neck from the headstock, like this. So you can hear how they're rising in pitch. And this might seem a little bit weird, saying moving up the neck, because, you know, to look at it, it looks like we're moving down the neck, down towards the floor. But that'll make more sense as you start to play more. Just think that when we're down at the headstock down here, we've got low notes, and as we move further along, we get high notes. So we say we're moving up the neck, meaning up through the notes, okay? Also, if we move across the neck from the thickest note to the thinnest, the thickest string to the thinnest string, we move up in pitch as well. So if we move up along it that way, we rise in pitch. If we move across the neck, we also rise in pitch. So you can hear us, I'm playing the thick string and then moving, we get higher in pitch. You heard it go up in pitch there. And moving along the neck as well. So let's just try and get a sound out of the bass, first of all, by plucking a string with the thumb. Okay, so this is a very simple way of plucking that a lot of people try when they first start out. You don't have to worry about all the technical side of finger picking. So don't worry about the fretting hand for the moment. I just want you to pluck the thickest string. Okay, so if you've got a 4-string bass, it's going to be this note here, the E string. Okay, if it's a 5-string bass, then you might have a B string down there. But just take that lowest note, or the thickest string there, And I just want you to try plucking it with the thumb, okay? Just like that. And I just want you to play that one string. So just concentrate on plucking that one string. I don't want, you know, all these notes ringing out, and you don't want any of that. It's just that one string. And if you do get other strings ringing out, then just make sure to be more subtle with it. There, like that. Okay? And you can cut the note off any way you want by just holding it down, but just that one string. When you play a string without holding down any of the frets there on the neck, that's called an open string. Okay, so there's an open string. If I was to play, you know, fretting some of the notes there on the neck, they'd be fretted notes. This, we have an open string. And because this note that we play, when we play that string, is an E, that's the open E string. Okay, so we've got the E string there, so if we pluck an open E string, we get the note E, okay? Now if this was a 5 string and we had an extra string below, then that's usually a B, okay? So that would be an open B string. And so then we have the next note, that's an open A string, we have an open D string there, and an open G string, but I'll come to those in a second. So just get used to plucking that open string to begin with, the open E, and take note that when you pluck it softer, it's a quieter note. When you pluck it harder, obviously it's a louder note, okay? So yeah, just get used to plucking that open E string. So now let's try plucking the next string along, the next thinnest string, and that's the A string. So we take this next one here, and we pluck that with the thumb, and that's an A, okay? And notice that that's higher in pitch than the E. So we had the E, then we've got the A. Now, if we just go from playing the E, and then we go to playing the A, you'll notice that they both play together and you get this horrible clash. So what we need to do is we need to be able to stop the note before we move to the next one, okay? So like this. Okay? And to do that, we can bring this hand into play. So all you have to do is lie the hand on the string to stop it. Okay, so you just need to get used to plucking. So I'm with the E string again, just need to get used to plucking the E string there, and then just bringing the hand down enough to stop it, okay? So in terms of this hand, the technique, you want to take the thumb, put the thumb on the back of the neck, okay? So we've got the thumb there on the back, and then when we pluck that E string, just bring the hand down, relaxed. You don't want to push down, on the neck, you just lie it there, just enough to stop the note, okay? So then, once you've done that, we can move to the A string, and we don't have to worry about the sound of that E string getting in the way. Okay. So then move on to the D string. So the next note there, the next thinnest, is the D, and then just cut it off. Okay. Then we move up onto the G string. So you want to get used to playing each one of these strings without playing any of the other strings. You know, like I said, you don't want, you know, any of this kind of thing. Just that single string and then cut it off. Okay, and that's the open strings. So we have E, A, D, and G, and it's very important to remember that combination or that sequence of notes. So we've got the E string, A string, D string, G string. I don't know if there's any ways of remembering that just as iadga. Okay. Now, before we go any further, let's finish looking at the remaining parts of the bass. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this metal section down here is called the bridge. And that's easy to remember because if you look closely, you'll see that the strings go over these little saddles. Now, the strings ride over those saddles like you might drive over a bridge. Okay, so that's one way of thinking about it. So this is where we attach the strings to the bass, and we adjust different things like the string height, and it's really, really important in setting up the bass. And as you'll see when we get to restringing the bass, this is the first place that the strings come through, so we have to wind them through the bridge to attach them up here. Okay, so that's the bridge. Next, the strings go over the pickups. Now you'll see my pickups here, these little square things in the middle of the bass. And the pickups are basically little microphones that pick up the sounds of the string, and from there they get sent out via the volume and the tone controls to the amp. Some basses have one set of pickups like this, precision. Other basses have two pickups, like jazz basses, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, and they all have different types of sound. Again, I'm going to be covering those in later lessons in the series. For now, just think of them as little microphones. Once we pass the pickups, the strings travel along the neck that we've talked about up to this little block here at the start of the fretboard, and this is called the nut. And this is where the strings are held in place in these little ridges that are cut out for them. Now, this keeps the strings stable and in place, and it sets the height at the end of the neck, or the beginning of the neck, whichever way you want to look at it. After the nut, the strings finally attach to these metal parts here on the tuning pegs, where you can wind them on and wind them to the correct pitch. But yeah, this little thing here, that's the nut, and that comes in all different types of material. This one's plastic, you get metal ones, all kinds of materials. So yeah, that's the nut. So now let's try tuning the bass. Now it's important to learn to tune the bass right from the start, otherwise all the notes that we play on all the different strings are going to be out of tune with each other. So for this lesson, we'll just stick with manually tuning to the notes that I play. So I'm going to play an open string and then you can tune to that, okay? Now the first thing that you're going to need to learn is how to use the tuning pegs. Now as I mentioned before, the tuning pegs are these metal contraptions up here on the headstock. The string goes in a little hole in here, and then it winds around there, around the shaft of that peg, and then we turn these keys here to change the pitch of the, or tighten or loosen the string. Now as you tighten the string, the pitch goes up, and as you loosen the string, the pitch goes down, like this. So if I take the G string, the top string there, so I'm turning it there, I'm turning it anti-clockwise, the pitch goes up, turn it clockwise, I loosen the string, and the pitch goes down, okay? Now you have to be really careful with this, because if you tighten it too much, it'll keep getting higher and higher and higher in pitch until the string snaps, okay? And each one of them will snap at a certain point, so be really careful, don't tighten it too much. You don't want to go too much above the actual open string pitch. So if you get to a G on a G string, you don't want to go that much further than it, because you're in danger of snapping it. Conversely, if you loosen it off, eventually the string will just fall out of the peg and fall off, okay? So again, just be aware of that as you're doing it, and just get used to turning the peg there, tuning it to different pitches, okay? So first of all, let's try tuning the thinnest and highest sounding string, the G string. So remember, the string names from the thickest to the thinnest are E, A, D, G. So I'm going to play my G string, and I want you to turn the tuning peg on your G string until it sounds the same as my G string, okay? So I'll give you an example first. So here on the backing track, I've got a G note. It's a sample of a bass playing a G, and we know that one's in tune, okay? So if I play that, there we have that a sample of the G string. Now if I detune my G string and then play along with it, you can hear that horrible noise, that horrible waver. You know, that is the sound of an out of tune string, okay? So we want to aim to tighten that string up, or loosen it if you were sharp, but I'm going to have to tighten it up because I've loosened mine off, until we get back in tune. So I'll play it again. Okay, so you can hear how that's a lot nicer. We don't have that horrible noise. As it comes back into tune, it evens out, you know. So we have that horrible waver sound before, and then as we get into tune, the waves diminish and we end up with a nice pure tone, okay? So that's what we want to be aiming for, okay? Now, this can be quite difficult for beginners because your ear is going to be less well developed, and it can be confusing as to how to tune the string in the first place. You might ask yourself questions like, is it sharp or is it flat, or how sharp is it, or how flat is it? But with experience of playing, you're eventually going to know the sound of a string being too sharp or too flat, and how far you need to turn the peg to get it back in tune. But for a beginner, it can be a little bit daunting. So I'll just give you a few tips for getting started. First of all, when you're going to tune, loosen off. Okay, that way that you know that you're only going to have to tighten to get back into tune. So if I'm playing that G string again, at don't want to loosen it too much, but bring it down so that then if I was to hear that G string, I know that I'm flat, okay? So I need to tighten the string. So loosening it off gives us a good reference point. We're not having to think, oh, am I sharp or am I flat? You just think, I'm flat, I need to come up. Obviously, if you were too sharp in the first place and then you just only flattened it a little bit, you might still be sharp. So, loosen it off a fair bit, and then bring it up. And as you bring it up, sometimes you'll feel like you're getting a bit too high and it's going to snap or something like that. But don't worry, just bring it up until it gets to the correct pitch, okay? So now I'll just work through each of the strings in turn. I'll play my string and then you just tune to it. So you want to match up to the sound that you hear from my notes. So like I said before you do it, just loosen off the string a few turns, and then you want to tune up to the sound of my string, okay? So this is the G string. So you should have now a string that sounds pretty much exactly the same as my string. And like I say, as a tip, loosen it off before you do it so that you know that you have to tighten it up, okay? So now we'll go on to the D string. So this is the next thickest string. Loosen it off a few turns and then tighten up. Now the A string. And now the E string. And you'll notice that it's actually a little bit tougher sometimes to tune the lower pitched strings. As the frequency gets lower, it can sometimes be a little bit tougher to hear, which is why I started with the G string there, the highest pitched string, because you can hear it a little bit easier. If you download the lesson material from the button below the video, that contains some audio files of the notes that I was using to tune to earlier. And if you go to the practice room on TalkingBass.net in the members area, if you go down to the bass tuner, you'll be able to find those exact same samples so that you can tune to them in your own time. So you don't have to keep watching this video to try and tune them. Okay? So just try to get as much practice as you can at tuning the strings. At first it'll seem quite difficult, you'll spend quite a while going up and down trying to find the correct pitch, but eventually it'll become very simple and you'll just get there straight away. It's just learning you just have to know the sound of an out of tune string and know the sound of an in tune string, okay? It's nothing about being tone deaf or anything like that. You just have to get used to that waver and hear it when it gets to that kind of pure tone. That's what you're aiming for. In upcoming lessons, I'm going to show you how to tune the bass to itself for when a string goes out of tune, and I'll also be showing how to use electronic tuners. But for now, it's better to just practice developing your ear, okay? So that when you're out of tune and you're tuning your strings and you don't have reference notes and you don't have an electronic tuner, you'll be okay. You can just tune them up. So, like I said, just practice tuning them up because this is an essential and fundamental skill that you can have as a bass player. So now you should have the bass plugged in tune and held correctly, and you should also know the names of the open strings and be able to at least pluck them one at a time with the right hand and then choke them silent with the left hand. So next I'm just going to test you on the open strings by calling out a string, E, A, D or G, and then you can play it and I'll play it with you so that you'll know whether you've played it correctly or not, okay? So this should help in memorizing the order. So first of all, as a practice run, if I say E, that's the lowest string here, so I'll say E, then I'll play it. So when I say E, you play the E string, and hopefully it'll sound like the string that I'm playing, okay? So I'll just run through them randomly. So let's go for the E string, D string, A string, G string, E string, A string, E string, A string, D string, G string, D string, G string, A string, E string. Now we've covered the open strings, we can quickly look at how to play all the other notes on the bass by using the notes on the fretboard. So first of all, we need to know that we don't place the finger down on the fret. We place it between the frets. So we don't place the finger down there on the fret because you'll get that horrible noise. You place it between the frets. And it's also important to know that the frets are recognised by number. And the numbering starts up here at this nut end of the fretboard. So this is the first fret, second fret, third fret, etc. Often bassers have markers on the fretboard to give you a visual aid as to where we are on the neck. And these usually start at the third fret here. So we can see that dot there, the little white inlay there. That's the third fret. Then we've got the fifth fret, seventh fret, ninth fret, and then we've got two dots there for the 12th fret. So think of odd numbers, 3, 5, 7, 9. So we've got third fret, fifth fret, seventh fret, ninth fret, and then we get the 2 there, the 12th fret. Okay, and then they carry on up here. We've got the 15th fret, the 17th fret, and the 19th fret. So these are a repetition of these ones down here, but I'll get to that later. Just be aware that that's what those fret markers are for. It's so that we know which fret we're on. Okay, so you don't have to be stood there going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's that one. These are a good visual aid for us. So let's try fretting a simple note down here at the first fret of the E string. Okay, and this is going to be the note F. So the thumb should be on the back of the neck, and we just press down with the index finger, that first finger there, on the space between the nut there and the first fret, and we just play. So we'll play with the thumb, and there's an F. Okay. So the best place to press down, we press down to the fretboard, okay, to the wood, but the best place to put it is put the finger just behind that fret there. So you don't want it down here, you want it just close to the fret, not on top of the fret. Like I said, you'll get all that rattle just behind it. And you'll need to press down fairly hard with it so that we press down to the wood. If you don't press down hard enough, you'll get this kind of sound. So you want to press down nice and hard, but we don't want to bend the string at all. And then we just pluck it and there it is. Okay? So now let's try another note on the E string. Okay, so we'll try the third fret. Now we know from the fret markers that I told you about, third fret, that's the first of these fret markers. So press down, index finger there. Okay, just pluck it there with the thumb. Like I said, you don't want to be getting any of this. You don't want to be plucking the other strings at the same time. Just lightly pluck it with the thumb and hold it down nice and firm. Okay. So that note we just played, the third fret on the E string, that was a G note. Okay. Now, if we move to the same fret on the A string, so here, that note's a C. Okay, so again, push down and be careful not to pluck any of the other notes. So we don't want to be, plucking the E string as well. Just be very careful. Watch your hand as you do it. If you have any problems, look at the plucking hand and just pluck that A string there. So that's a C note that we're playing. So the third fret there. And remember, third fret, we've got that marker there. Now try the fifth fret. So this is going to be the next marker up. Okay, so we press it down there. Okay. And that note's a D. So you want to try playing notes all over the fretboard. Don't worry about how they sound at the moment, just get a feel for pressing down the notes and plucking them. Don't worry about all the technical aspects just yet, just stick to that index finger, the first finger, for pressing down the note, and just keep plucking with the thumb. So don't worry about any of the other stuff. We'll move on to finger style and the different fingers later on, and we'll also use plectrums as well. So like I say, just start whichever just move around and aim to get a nice clean tone. Like I say, you don't want to be right over the fret and getting any of this kind of sound. It's just behind the fret there. And don't pluck too hard because you'll start getting funny noises as well. So just a normal. If you pluck too hard, often you'll get quite a bit of buzz. And also, like I said, if you don't press down hard enough, sometimes you'll get buzz. So you'll get a feel for it just with experience of playing. So just, like I say, move around and get used to playing it. So let's finish off with a very simple rhythm moving between two different notes, okay? So we're going to start with the 3rd fret on the A strings, the C there, okay? So we've got the 3rd fret A string. Okay, so if you look at that there, that's on the 3rd fret marker, so the first of these markers there. So again, that's a C. And we'll just play this rhythm. So it's just a continuous rhythm. Just think 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we want to move to the G, which is going to be the 3rd fret of the E string. So it's the same fret, but on the E string. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So that's a very simple line that will help you get moving from one string to another in time, okay? And really don't worry about it for now, you know, just being perfect with it, you know, and keeping in time. You just need to get used to moving from one string to another. This is similar to when you're playing guitar and you just get used to playing the different chord patterns and moving from one to another. But it's a slight bit easier with bass because you're just going between the one note, you know. So we've just got that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Very simple line, just getting you used to moving between the two strings. So just to summarise over what we've been through, we looked at the parts of the bass. So we had the body, the neck and the headstock. We also had the individual parts on there. We had the bridge, we've got the strings themselves, the pickups, we've got the tone control and the volume control there. We've got the fretboard with the frets on the neck there. We've also got the tuning pegs up here for tuning, and we've also got the nut. Okay, so that's the main parts of the bass. We also went over tuning. So we learned how to tune the bass. So remember to download those reference points, reference audio files, and have a listen to them at the practice room on TalkingBass.net. And so get used to tuning. We also went over the string names. So we had E, A, D, and G. So get used to that. And we've learned how to pluck with the thumb there and then just hold down some individual notes. Okay, just going between a C and a G. And also the fret markers. 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret and 12th fret. So there's quite a lot there. A bit of a jam-packed introductory lesson. So you just want to get used to all that stuff, download the material, have a look through the stuff, have a look at the bass, you know, get to know your way around and just experiment. Just try and get creative because you've just started playing and you just want to just move around and start, you know, getting used to playing notes on the instrument. So that's all for this jam-packed introductory lesson. The next lesson we're going to be looking a little bit closer at the fretboard and we're going to start looking at finger picking. Okay, so I'll see you there.